Released from captivity, an American woman and her family are freed from the Taliban in Pakistan. President Trump reacts. Deadly California wildfires.
We just moved all the equipment away from our fuel tanks and just ran for it.
Why firefighters are struggling to stop the flames from spreading. Death penalty dilemma.
Si deve affermare con forza.
Pope Francis proposes a new approach to the Catechism's teaching on capital punishment. And protecting prayer. Lawmakers praise a court decision to save an American tradition in Congress. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, October 12th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Americans free at last. President Trump praises the release of a family held captive by a Taliban-linked group. Caitlin Coleman of Stewartstown, Pennsylvania, and her husband Joshua Boyle were abducted while traveling through Afghanistan 5 years ago. They had 3 children while in captivity. President Trump is grateful that Pakistan helped secure their release.
I want to thank Pakistan. They worked very hard on this, and I believe they're starting to respect the United States again. It's very important.
The president has been encouraging Pakistan to stand with America in the war on terror. Wildfires continue to rage in California. Gusty winds and dry air fuel those flames already burning across the state.
We really thought that the hills were going to protect us, but these winds, I know they can come up at any time.
The fires could become the deadliest and most destructive in California history. 24 people have died. At least 3,500 homes and businesses have been destroyed. The state fire chief says it's going to continue to get worse before it gets better. We reached out to the Catholic community in Napa Valley, which has been hit hard. Matthew Heil, a native of St. Helena, tells us that despite the devastation, Catholics in the area are banding together, praying the rosary, attending Mass, and helping neighbors. He also says he's never heard the word prayer used more in that area. The federal government is pouring aid into Puerto Rico to help it recover from Hurricane Maria, but President Trump tweeted this morning that first responders can't stay there forever. He blames the U.S. territory for its financial struggle, and crumbling infrastructure. The president's tweets drew criticism from the mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulin Cruz. She called them unbecoming of a commander-in-chief and said they appeared to come from a, quote, hater-in-chief. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are in the middle of approving a $36 billion aid package for the island. Frustrated by failures in Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare, President Trump is renewing efforts to abolish it. He signed an executive order today that aims to make lower premium plans more widely available across state lines. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump says he's been hearing about the disaster of Obamacare for years. And today he predicts millions and millions of people will benefit from his executive action to begin unwinding the Affordable Care Act.
It's not a repeal and replace bill, but with his executive order, the president says consumers will have wider access to health insurance plans featuring lower premiums.
The competition will be staggering. Insurance companies will be fighting to get every single person signed up. And you will be hopefully negotiating, and you'll get such low prices for such great care.
That competition will be driven by allowing employers to team up to offer health insurance across state lines. Republican Senator Rand Paul, who has fought GOP efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare, calls the president bold.
President Trump is doing what I believe is the biggest free market reform of health care in a generation. This reform, if it works and goes as planned, will allow millions of people to get insurance across state lines at an inexpensive price.
On balance, I probably would have recommended against it.
James Capretta, a healthcare expert and a Catholic, says it's too early to predict the effects of the order, but in his view, a legislative solution would be more effective. And in crafting any legislation, it's important to keep in mind people in low-income brackets, according to Catholic social teaching.
The country needs the safety net insurance program. That's going to be Medicaid for low-income people. We ought to recognize that, support it, make sure it works. It doesn't have to be exactly how it was done in the Affordable Care Act, but it has to be something. And so there needs to be an agreement about what income level below which we're going to make sure people are totally protected.
Senator Dick Durbin, a Democrat of Illinois, says President Trump is sabotaging America's healthcare system and hurting working families. The president says the healthcare system will get better with his action, but he still wants Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare. Lauren?
Mark, when will today's order go into effect?
Experts say the executive order probably won't have much impact on premiums in 2018, which are expected to be sharply higher in many states for people buying their own policies. Americans will likely start seeing the effects in 2019.
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. President Trump announces his pick for Homeland Security Secretary. Kirstjen Nielsen worked as chief of staff at the department before becoming a White House aide.
Through her wisdom and her leadership, she has won the universal respect of my entire cabinet and senior White House staff.
Trump says Nielsen will be ready on day one after the Senate confirms her nomination. The nuclear deal with Iran, crafted by former Secretary of State John Kerry, is on the chopping block. President Trump appears poised to decertify the program this week. He's expected to lay out a new strategy, despite support from the international community saying that Iran is fulfilling its end of the deal. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The State Department regularly advises the president on whether Iran is in compliance with this deal, but time is running out. The Trump administration has until Sunday, October 15th, to make a decision, and it's clear the president's not a fan. President Donald Trump has voiced his disdain for the Iran nuclear deal on the campaign trail and now in the White House.
It was a terrible agreement. It shouldn't have been signed. It shouldn't have been negotiated the way it was negotiated.
But the president is refusing to say whether he'll decertify the accord or scrap it altogether.
2 years of intensive negotiations.
President Obama, along with leaders from Europe, Russia, and China, supported the 2015 deal, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Under the agreement, Iran pledged to drastically reduce its stockpile of uranium and cut the number of gas centrifuges by 2/3 in exchange for lifting sanctions. Michael Duran, a Middle East expert, says while it may have been good intention, the deal is full of flaws.
I think we ceded an enormous amount of leverage to the Iranians and got very little in return. The biggest problem with it is that it provides a patient pathway to a bomb. All the Iranians have to do is abide by the deal, and within about 10 years, they're home free.
Duran says that's because over time, many of the restrictions are slowly lifted. He supports President Trump's reevaluating the deal, but on Capitol Hill, lawmakers who voted against the deal are now urging the president to uphold it.
As flawed as the deal is, I believe we must now enforce the hell out of it. Let's work with allies to make certain that international inspectors have better access to possible nuclear sites.
Many Democrats back the deal because they say it provides a window by which the U.S. can monitor what's happening in Iran. This week, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani told his cabinet that if the U.S. backs out of the deal, it would be a failure for America, not Iran. Despite the international community insisting Iran is compliant so far with the deal, many U.S. allies readily admit Iran's government still deals in terrorism, human rights violations, and money laundering. Lauren?
Wyatt, when can we expect a decision from the president?
Well, Lauren, as you mentioned, the president is expected to announce his next step tomorrow. Now, we learned in a late afternoon State Department press briefing that Secretary Rex Tillerson has been on the phone with many of his counterparts in Russia, China, the UK, and France, letting them know about Donald Trump's speech. Now, they haven't announced the content of those phone calls, but many assume, or many predict actually, that the president will decertify the deal. Now, so if that happens, it would be up to Congress then to decide whether or not to restore the sanctions against Iran that would be lifted if when the U.S. agreed to the deal. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. The State Department says that the U.S. is pulling out of the UN cultural agency UNESCO because of its anti-Israel bias and a need for fundamental reform. Officials say Secretary of State Rex Tillerson made that decision. The withdrawal will take effect at the end of 2018. Death penalty opponents are cheering the Holy Father after he suggested the Catholic Church revise the catechism to ban capital punishment.
La pena di morte è inammissibile perché attenta all'inviolabilità e dignità della persona.
Francis saying capital punishment isn't justified under any circumstances. He made the comments yesterday during a ceremony at the Vatican marking the 25th anniversary of the Catechism published under Pope John Paul II. It permits the death penalty if it is the only way to defend life against an unjust aggressor. J.D. Flynn, the new editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency, joins us from Rome. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much.
You say that the Holy Father is presenting a strikingly different vision. What is it?
Well, Lauren, the Church's teaching on the death penalty is a very nuanced thing. The Church teaches, and the past several popes have been advocating, as have bishops around the world, for abolition of the death penalty, encouraging societies not to use the death penalty. At the same time, the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that when there are no other means to secure the common good, public safety, to ensure that we can be protected from people who are potentially dangerous, that the death penalty can be used, but only in the circumstances when there are no other means. Yesterday, Pope Francis said that the death penalty is in itself contrary to the gospel. And this is a different vision. Rather than saying that we ought not use the death penalty, he's saying that there's no possibility for its use. And that changes not only the way we understand the death penalty, but it represents a different way of looking at our social teaching and our doctrine.
Pope John Paul II formally revised the Catechism in 1997 to say that in this modern world, the cases where the death penalty is justified, quote, are very rare, if not practically inexistent. Is Pope Francis taking that teaching one step further?
Pope Francis is building on it. He is saying, as John Paul II did, as Benedict XVI did, he's saying that in the modern world, especially in the West, there seem to be no cases where we would have any need at all for the death penalty because we have other means of securing the common good and our safety. But yesterday what Pope Francis said is something different. Rather than saying we don't need it, he said that there's no moral justification for the death penalty at all. And for theologians, that represents a different approach. It brings to mind the idea of intrinsically evil acts, whereas the Church's traditional teaching has said that the death penalty should not be used except in very rare and restricted cases. What the Pope is saying now is that it can never be used under any circumstances.
Is that it? Is that the new rule?
Well, yeah. What will happen now is that theologians will discuss what does it mean for doctrine on the death penalty to develop. Is this, can we understand this as an authentic development of doctrine? Is this connected thoroughly with the doctrine that the Church teaches even now in the Catechism? And so the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith will be involved in that conversation, certainly, but also, you know, the Pope has a penchant for bringing in voices from so many different places. We can expect, I think, perhaps some unexpected voices in this conversation, working out theologically what this means and how we can understand this in continuity with the Church's teaching on execution.
Fascinating development. I'm sure we'll be following this in the future. Thank you so much for joining us, J.D. Flynn, Editor-in-Chief of Catholic News Agency.
Thanks a lot, Lauren.
Coming up, congressional prayer.
The prayer will be offered by the guest chaplain.
Let us pray.
A court protects a tradition dating back to the beginning of Congress. And life with Pope John Paul II. Author George Weigel tells me how the saint taught him lessons in hope. An atheist activist loses a lawsuit that would have changed Congress's opening prayer policy. Federal judge's ruling means the House of Representatives does not have to let an atheist offer a secular message in place of that prayer. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi spoke to the House chaplain who won this case. Jason.
And Lauren, the judge in this case points to American history. She says since the Continental Congress, lawmakers asked chaplains to offer a daily prayer. Today, that tradition of more than 240 years again triumphs.
Let us pray.
This tradition of prayer dates to the Founding Fathers. House rules require every single day's work start with prayer.
God bless America.
House Chaplain, Jesuit Father Pat Conroy, usually offers the opening prayer.
As Pope Francis has said, politics is a noble profession because it's about the common good. So my prayers every day are that the House would be at its best in seeing to the common good.
But Father Conroy said no to an atheist activist who wanted to serve as guest chaplain. Dan Barker is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Barker sued in 2016, saying Father Conroy, his staff, and Speaker Paul Ryan were discriminatory. In his lawsuit, Barker calls it a government prayer program systematically and explicitly engineered to exclude atheists. But Father Conroy tells me it comes down to prayer's definition.
To provide a prayer at the beginning of a session. That's what I have the power to do. Mr. Barker did not want to give a prayer.
And the judge agrees. She writes in her opinion, the reality is that his request to open the House with a secular invocation was a challenge to the ability of Congress to open with a prayer.
Your will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. Amen.
Speaker Ryan praises the ruling. He says the chamber sees the power of prayer in the return of Representative Scalise, who survived a shooting. And Lauren, the Catholic League calls the win a victory over militant atheism.
Jason, do you know if this atheist plans to appeal?
They're still contemplating. I just spoke with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and they tell me the decision feels like a slap in the face. It feels like atheists, she says, are second-class citizens.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, thank you. Pope Francis joins the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Congregation for Oriental Churches. The pontiff presided over a mass at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, where he paid homage to Eastern Catholic churches, which are increasingly being persecuted. Earlier, Patriarch Ignatius Joseph Younan, head of the Syriac Catholics, made an appeal to the West.
It's always that appeal to those mighty countries, especially in the Western world, to look at us not as numbers, but as people.
The Congregation for Oriental Churches was created in 1917 as the world was in the throes of the First World War. It is made up of 23 Eastern Catholic churches. St. John Paul II made a lasting imprint on the Catholic Church during his 26-year papacy. A new book by George Weigel, Lessons in Hope, My Unexpected Life with St. John Paul II, chronicles their unique friendship. It also tells the story of the Pope's role in the fall of communism and how the saint grappled with the post-9/11 world. Joining me now, the author himself, George Weigel. You're also the author of a 2-volume biography of John Paul II, but this one is much more personal. I loved reading all of your anecdotes. Why did you decide to do a personal book? What impact did he have on you that made you do this?
It was really the impact of the people I was speaking to in the second volume. The End and the Beginning came out in 2010. And I discovered that what people wanted 5 years after his death were stories. Stories that made him feel a little closer, kept him from drifting away into some distant fog of sanctity. And the more I reflected upon that, the more I thought this is like the impulse that led to Lives of the Saints back in the day. So I collected all of my stories, and now they're between
Well,
two
all of
covers.
your anecdotes are wonderful. Over one of the multiple dinners that you had with the Holy Father, he told you that he participated in the great experience of his contemporaries, humiliation at the hands of evil. Tell us what that was, why that's significant.
That was a remarkable moment. We were talking about his experience during the Second World War. And he said, you know, it hadn't been that radical. He hadn't been arrested. He hadn't been sent to a concentration camp. But he said, I participated in this experience of humiliation at the hands of evil, being helpless in the face of wickedness manifest all over the place. And I think it's during that period that his vocational discernment really came to fruition. and he decided to spend out his life defending human dignity through the priesthood of the Catholic Church.
I love the stories. I love what you tell. And I believe in reading the book that the most heartwarming story was the final meeting that you had in your last dinner. You write, "We looked into each other's eyes. I kissed his ring for the first time, I think, and then we parted for what turned out to be the last time." What was that moment like? You didn't know that it would be the last time.
No, I didn't, and I was still somewhat in awe of the fact that the first thing he said to me that evening, 2 months after my father had died, is, "How's your mother doing?" First thing he said to me. So, pastor's memory. There was also a great moment there. I had brought him as a Christmas present this big photo book of national parks of the United States. He goes to Rocky Mountain National Park outside Denver and looks at it and says, Rocky Mountain National Park, World Youth Day, 93. Bishops of America said it couldn't be done. I proved them wrong. So he still, you know, the fire was still there.
Yeah.
Even though that was 6 weeks before he went into the hospital. And that was the point at which I told him, if you don't bury me, I promise that I will finish what I started. Because Witness to Hope ends at the end of 1998. I thought I had finished what I started with the end and the beginning, but as I said a moment ago, you know, people taught me otherwise.
It's called Lessons in Hope, My Unexpected Life with St. John Paul II. The anecdotes are just wonderful. I have to say, basta pierogi.
Thank you.
Which is enough for today, which is what you were told by the Pope Secretary at the end of a meeting.
Thanks,
okay,
Lauren.
thank you
Great.
so much. Up next, Let There Be Light.
All I wanted to do was just put my arms around him.
A new feature film about faith, starring Kevin and Sam Sorbo. And Royal Wedding. Meet the Serbian prince, who hails from Fairfax, Virginia. The scope of the allegations surrounding media mogul Harvey Weinstein continues to expand. New York City police are taking a fresh look at sexual assault allegations against the Hollywood producer. And in England, London police are investigating another case. That's according to British media. The case reveals a culture of intimidation, violence, and disrespect for women in Hollywood. But some Christians in that industry are trying to change it on the big screen and beyond. Joining us now is Sam Sorbo, the co-writer, co-producer, and even star of the film, Let There Be Light. Welcome to the program again. Co-star. Why did you want to do this film?
I came up with the idea and it just appealed to me. It's the kind of movie that I want to see out of Hollywood, and I'm not seeing movies that I want to see necessarily from Hollywood. And so I kind of did it as a lark. I thought this would be a good film. And so this was a human drama. A moral dilemma, if you will. It's a man in crisis. It's a film that brings hope.
This is very timely because of the news coming out about the Harvey Weinstein scandal. It reveals a culture of real violence and abuse and disrespect for women. How can your film, do you think, have an impact on this culture?
I'll tell you exactly how. If people go to the theater to support this movie, it will send a message to Hollywood that we don't like the underbelly of Hollywood, that we want wholesome programming for our families. And what we've done is, you know, the moral majority of the United States, the people who have integrity and have virtue and value those things, have taken a back seat because the other side is so loud and so obnoxious, and it's kind of like, okay, fine, whatever, right? But we're learning now through the whole confrontation with the NFL, and people's voices are being heard now, and the NFL has now taken a step back and said, whoa, okay, we'll behave, we'll do what you want, we will stand for the anthem, right? Now people are waking up. They say, oh, you know, my voice does count for something. And you know what?
And women are standing up. Women are starting to stand up to this culture, just as you are by producing this film.
Yes.
So thank you so much for what you're doing and what you're doing in that industry.
Well, I'm trying. You know, I'm doing it for the culture. I'm not doing it for the industry. But if the industry wants to come alongside and support it, that's awesome, and I would applaud them. Opens October 27th. Go to Let There Be Light Movie, lettherebelightmovie.com, and check out the trailer. And then we have testimonials videos, and you will see this film is really impacting people. It's changing people's lives. It brings hope.
Thank you so much, Sam Sorbo, co-writer, co-producer, and co-star of Let There Be Light. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tonight on EWTN's ProLife Weekly, Catherine Zeltner delves into another dark side of Hollywood with pro-life activist and producer Jason Jones.
There seems to be that actors and actresses are hesitant to come out and describe themselves as pro-life.
Yeah, but that's not because of the entertainment industry. That's because of the news media. Think about this. If I'm an actor and actress and I come out as pro-life, the mainstream media is going to nuke me. And then that's going to make me toxic, so casting agents are going to shun me.
You can watch ProLife Weekly tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. It re-airs Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Finally tonight, a royal wedding in Serbia for the crown prince of the former kingdom. Prince Philip Karađorđević married the daughter of a prominent Serbian painter. The head of the Serbian Orthodox Church presided over this storybook wedding at Belgrade's main cathedral. And it's an interesting story. Prince Philip's family was exiled when communists abolished the monarchy after World War II. He was actually born in Fairfax, Virginia, and the family returned to Serbia 17 years ago. That does it for us this evening. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Good night, and God bless you.